All right. Are we all ready? Now I got to remember what I say. Welcome back to the HR Social Hour Half Hour podcast. This is episode 201, The Best of HR Wonder Women Volume 2. I'm your host, Wendy, and I'm here all by myself today because I am pleased to share these awesome, wonderful HR women with you. Today's Volume 2 shares highlights from our episodes with Julie Sowash, Kirsten Greggs, Tiffany Toussaint, Natalie Egan, and Minda Harts. Now, I'm here with some bittersweet news for y'all. Ann and I have decided to close this chapter of HR Social Hour, and we will no longer be recording any HR Wonder Women episodes. As many of you know, we did take a break when Ann was undergoing some cancer treatment. Now, she is on the other side of that, which is fantastic news. However, as many people do when they go through something such as cancer treatment, Ann did decide to slow down on some of her commitments, and as such, we decided that it was time to close this chapter. We've had the chance to meet some awesome women. So I want to thank our past guests, Margaret Spence, who actually joined us twice, Tamika Mason, Kirsten Greggs, Tiffany Toussaint, Stephanie Ghostin Paul, Julie Sowash, Jennifer Brown, Kelly Wagner, Janine Dennis, Jen Daniel, Wendy Berry, Tamara Raspberry, Aiko Bethia, Elena Valentine, and Sarah Morgan. I truly enjoyed learning from all of you. I continue to learn from all of you on social media. So I do hope, listeners, that you will go to our archives and find these full episodes, listen to them, and then follow these wonderful, wonderful women on social media. Huge thank you to Ann, who has been a wonderful partner throughout this journey. Our friendship has grown. I love getting a chance, anytime I get a chance to talk to Ann, my day is brighter. But I also know that I can count on her to be among those that will call me in to help me be a better person. And that was the goal of HR Wonder Women, really, to share these voices with all of you, to lift them up, to share that there's more to HR than a bunch of middle-aged white ladies. So these women are fantastic representatives of some of those marginalized voices. I have to admit that I have recorded this open many times. I have tried, I have stumbled, and I'm trying to get it right. And that's really what the goal of HR Wonder Women was trying to get it right while doing some out loud learning. So I thank you all for listening and your encouragement as Ann and I have gone through this. And know that our work is not done. Ally is a verb, not a noun. And while I hope that people will use that word to describe me, I know that my work is not done. So I will continue to learn out loud and share with you as I stumble in hopes that some of you will also learn from me. So again, I hope you'll enjoy this episode of HR Wonder Women, our Volume 2 Greatest Hits. So definitely enjoy listening to Julie, Kirsten, Tiffany, Natalie, and Minda. Follow them all on social media and continue to learn. So thank you to all of our listeners. Now, go and tell your story.
For people with cognitive difficulties, like you said, or for people with mental health issues, or whatever it is, you think about who would need the most, I don't know if help is the right word, but who needs the most thoughtful approach to this? But it's not like somebody else is going to lose out because you have a thoughtful approach to what you're doing. Everyone benefits when your approach is really thoughtful and making sure that it's meeting the needs of everyone.
Yeah, and I think if you think about it in a little bit different, if I can shift the paradigm just a little bit, but not think about what people need in terms of support, it's in how do I get the most? How do I help build my teams up to be able to live right to their most successful potential? And when you think about it as opportunities to build more successful teams, it feels a little, I think for me, a little more authentic and a little bit more exciting. We're not talking about the negative. We're talking about the positive. And so what are those things on the edges, right, that cause the innovation, that allow us to bring the entire team up? And that team will include people with disabilities, but it's also going to include extremely high performers who may have disabilities of their own and you just don't know about it, but also are going to feel much more a part of a team and understand process and engagement in an entirely different way.
Let's talk a little bit about that, why it's so important to have that visible diversity.
Because it takes time to build relationships, and it takes time to get to a, for lack of a better word, comfort level. Like when I walk into a room and I see someone like me, I see someone that has one of those things that I can latch onto visibly. Like if I walked into a room with 11 white men and you or Ann was in there, I would probably initially gravitate to one of you. If I walked into a room where it was all, where it was 10 older people and one person who looked like they were around my age, I would probably gravitate to them. If I walked into a room full of Black people, I'm probably going to feel safe. And I'm being honest. I was asked that question before when I was still in corporate America by the vice president of HR. We were designing a group designing a talent development group that was going to cater to increasing, our diversity pipeline and getting more people who were already employees of the company, into more leadership positions. And initially, it was set up where they wanted it to be. It had started a year before with some Black people being brought into a cohort, and I was one of them, and no one was allowed to know about it. And this was supposed to be the second stage of that, and we were going to extend it, to people that, didn't have to have that, keep it to yourself, don't talk about this, because it was mostly like HR people and or, again, senior leaders. So when it got out to the rest of the people, they decided to open it up to everyone. And, as I'm sure you just rolled your eyes. You guys didn't see, but Ann just rolled her eyes.
Well, like you can tell, what's coming. Coming.
You know it's coming. So it became heavily white women. Some younger white women. And some younger white men that they escalated, put into this program. But I was asked, well, if we kept it all Black, like Kirsten, because this person probably didn't remember that he had met me before. We worked in different offices, and maybe I didn't sound Black enough for him, but we were on the phone. So he's like, well, Kirsten, how would you feel if you walked into a room with, all Black people? And I said, I would feel safe. And he was stunned because, again, the other people on the phone, he knew they were Black leaders because they were on his team. They were either his peers or they reported to him. He did not realize that I was not his quote unquote, I wasn't going to support or be his ally. I was going to be someone else's. So I find that is that's been my experience. That's been my experience several times. So I do think the visual thing, it 100%. It matters to me. And I think it matters to others who are, not, I don't want to use that term. That's going to sound bad. Who don't look what is different about them, if that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, so for example, you've talked about, managing depression, right? So that's like a hidden disability. So it doesn't, you never lead with that unless you choose to lead with that.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of it. Like we haven't been socialized to think of depression or anxiety as a disability, or an illness or even a health concern when it comes to, when I think, because when we think about disability, we think about someone who, has a physical impairment. And let's be clear, like, depression does cause physical things to come up, but again, like I'm not going to, go into a different bathroom because of it. Like there are certain things that are like I'm not going to take advantage of, and because of the stigma associated with it. While I don't have a problem discussing it, I don't shy away from it. I talk about it as much as I can because I think it helps other people, and it allows other people to open up to me, and again to take that. Oh my God, like thank you for saying that, because I needed to hear that, because this is what I'm going through. And especially as a recruiter, I have to be careful because people do dump so much on you, and people put so much of what's going on in their lives personally on you that I have to be able to, take my own time and come back to myself enough. And I'm comfortable enough to say, listen, I'm below the line today. And these are the things that I can't handle. These are my boundaries for today. Like, I will have to deal with this another time. I'm not cool with that.
So you've talked a little bit about the things, and I think this is so important, right? Making sure that we're weaving this DEI into all aspects of the business, and it doesn't stay this sort of side program. But you're in talent acquisition. So talk to us from a talent acquisition perspective. How can we get more Black women and non-Black women of color into that talent pipeline to get them into that leadership position?
I think it goes back to organizational culture. If I, as I look for a job, or as candidates are looking for their next opportunity, organizations need to be upfront about who they are. If diversity, equity, and inclusion is truly important to them, it's going to be part of that conversation when they are out trying to tap people on the shoulder to join their business. If it isn't currently part of who they are and they want it to be, the recognition that there's a gap there, but they know what they're going to do to close that gap says a lot. So if you're out there and you're trying to bring people into your organization and you want a diverse slate, or you want to diversify your workforce, you have to be able to back it up and prove that you have the tools, the resources, and the environment and culture internally in your organization to support. And what I mean by that is, so frequently we talk about, bringing our whole selves to work. I should not, I identify as a mom. I identify as a Black woman. I am single. I should not have to leave any of that at the door as I'm walking into the office to work for the day. And organizations need to be able to prove that they can support that. So I should be able to be a Black single mom at my job, just like I'm a Black single mom when I'm at home.
In terms of my privilege and my responsibility, I think that's one of my big, I don't want to say it's like a calling, but it's a big part of who I am, that I have the opportunity to work with a lot of HR professionals and businesses in general. And I talk a lot about how they can help the trans community. And I think, first and foremost, you kind of really have to look at the numbers. And I think that's where a lot of people immediately don't even realize statistically, like what we're talking about here. The old, and I say old, like, it's the old number. I think from 2003, the Williams Institute out of UCLA put together a study. It was the most formal study at the time, and it was a very limited and a very flawed study. But ultimately kind of gave us a number that generally that people accepted as like, okay, as a baseline, 1% of the population is transgender, right? So 1 out of every 100. And that number, even though it seems small, is actually still quite big. Like if you have 1 out of every 100, that's a pretty big piece of the population. Especially when you start to multiply it by, the ecosystem of people around that, right? So, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But realistically, another report. Realistically, we're talking about 3 to 4% of the population. That's a report that came out just about a year and a half ago as part of the National Trans Center for Equality. They did one of the largest, most comprehensive studies to date. That original study was only talking to adults, and it was only surveying out adults. So so if you'd given me that, I would have said no, because I didn't even know what I was at the time. That's a whole nother podcast. But colleges and universities are reporting about 7 to 8% of their incoming freshman class are reporting somewhere on the gender non-binary spectrum, which doesn't necessarily mean they're transitioning like male to female, but they're observing this behavior of not exactly identifying as a boy or as a girl, or and there's all this like sort of space in between, and that is a alarmingly huge number, right? So if we're talking about let's just call it 5% of your incoming workforce is somewhere on that spectrum, you really need to shift your everything, right? Your hiring models, your recruiting questions, your everything on the front end, all that sort of tactical stuff. But you really need to start thinking strategically. What does this mean for our business? What does this mean for for banks? The question that they're asking is, what does this mean for the future of wealth, right? And if you start to think about that in the context of the long game of your business, this is a really significant change in your business, especially healthcare. There's all kinds of businesses that are based on like this very binary concept of male and female, including product lines and all kinds of stuff. So, if there's some change there, there can be a lot of upside. There can also be, a fair amount of risk in the near term. But I think for the companies that have figured this out and are thinking beyond kind of just, hey, the average, this is shifting thankfully, but the number of people that are like, we're not that interested because we don't have any trans employees. That kind of conversation is fading pretty quick because people are realizing, shit, if we have 100 employees, statistically, we probably have 3 to 4 that are repressed. And if you have, let's just say you have 3 to 4 that are out, let's just say hypothetically they are, then you have to think about the ecosystem around them, their children, their spouses, your vendors, your suppliers, the customers. Like, you potentially have thousands of trans identities surrounding your business, very quickly before you even realize it. And so your messaging, we kind of briefly touched earlier, I think, like, language matters. And so if you're looking to attract and retain the very best talent, even if the individual you're recruiting isn't trans, chances are they went to college with trans kids. And they want to be in an environment that's just as accepting of their identity as all their friends. So it requires a pretty big shift. And I think that the major call to action is to get educated. This is no longer a passive, like, hey, we'll wait until somebody transitions here kind of thing. You need to get ahead of this. And I think what's most amazing is when you see organizations kind of really putting that language out there to show that their current employees that this is okay. We are going to accept you for whoever you are, and seeing companies do things like that, bringing in trans speakers, celebrating trans awareness, day and transgender day of visibility and remembrance, all these things, mean a lot, again, to the mom whose daughter is trans, right? And by the way, like, those same employees are going to be making like long-term career decisions about health benefits for their family based on which companies are offering transition-related insurances. So, this is really deep stuff, and there's a whole downside, like a whole like liability kind of side to it, but there's a ton of upside as well. Trans people are, from a customer perspective and an employee perspective, are ready to be loyal. Like, they're waiting for companies to say, like Salesforce, like, try and get a trans employee to leave Salesforce. Like, they will not, because they believe that that's their safe place. It's incredible what they've done there. And so, there's a whole side of retention and engagement and loyalty that you can tap into. But at the same time, like, the employees themselves are, and sorry, not just the employees themselves, but it's the sort of, again, the ecosystem around them are looking for those opportunities to, like, my parents will only go to Target now. I mean, it sounds sort of simple, but like, it's like that they believe in what that company has done. And they, it's not gonna lie to you, they liked Target before, but they love them even more now.
Right.
It's just because of that sort of ecosystem around them, around me, that has that impact. I think the smartest companies are tapping into that.
If you build it, they will come.
And some people will leave.
And some people will, yeah.
Like, it's amazing to me. I actually work with some banks on this type of conversation, and they literally, they'll have customers call them and say, I saw this poster you had hanging in the retail branch of, some sort of LGBT kind of thing. And I'm very concerned about that. And I don't want to be a part of this bank that, is promoting this lifestyle. And literally the chief diversity officer of these banks will write them letters back and say, here's the name of 4 of our competitors. Go.
This is an easy one because I eat, breathe, sleep Beyonce. And so Beyonce is, again, I just love the fierceness and the way that she has, I love her music, but I also love the way that her activism has grown, right? So from when she first came out to where she is now, it's just her metamorphosis as a woman and an activist. I really admire that.
I love how she's using her power for good. The whole story when it came out about her stepping away from Nike to say, you put a bunch of white guys in front of me and you think we're going to work together? No. And I love that she did it. And we make these things public. And, in the past, it would have swept under the rug and no one would have said anything about it. But now, we make them public and we share and people see and learn and grow. I love it.
Yes. Yeah, I love the way you said that she uses her power for good, because she really is a superhero.
Yes, she is. She is. I don't know anyone who, love or hate her music. That's one thing. And we listen to her music, but it's not my style, which is fine. I can appreciate it as someone who appreciates music. And some of her songs, obviously, you got to get up and dance to because they're just songs. But I just love that there's very few people who are like, oh, Beyonce, no, I don't like her. Because she's just universally she has a likable persona. I haven't met her in person, so I can't say, but her persona
I haven't either,
is likable.
So the persona, yes. And using her, we could see her good deeds out in the world, right? And so I think that also lends to a good shake moment with her.
Right.
But I also think she's breaking so many barriers, like you said, Minda, her activism, and her fierceness. And there's something about a woman who is able to be likable and fierce at the same time, because that is not, and I think, and especially for a woman of color, right? Like, that is not an easy feat to own your own fierceness and still be approachable and have, like, everybody feels like, oh, I could be her best friend.
Right? Yeah.
At the same time. And so that's a really big deal, because a lot of women, I think, sacrifice their own sense of fierceness for likability.
Absolutely. Because like Wendy said, you don't hear often, oh, I don't like Beyonce. She's this, she's that. You might not like her music, but you don't hear somebody say they don't like her as the person that we perceive her to be. And I think, to your point, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and because the perception is typically, and I'll pick on Hillary Clinton, she's a tough woman, so she's a bitch. Mm-hmm. Which is why I like Tina Fey kind of put it out there, bitches get shit done. So let's stop the negative connotation to that. But that's usually what happens when you are fierce and you're assertive. It could have very easily turned out with the whole Nike thing where people are like, well, Beyonce's just a bitch. Yeah. But she has enough of that goodwill with the community, which isn't easy, but maybe we should be extending more fierce women, more strong women, that grace to say, no, she's just being strong. She's not just being a bitch because you don't like how her face looks.
Right. Because if you, not to like beat a dead horse, but you think about like Serena, she's fierce, right? But people have all kinds of things to say about her fierceness, right? So she can't, hers has to be contained, right? Yep. And there's just the way that we allow some women to do it and some not. Is another topic, right?
We could go on.
It is unusual that we get to the deepest part of this show when we start talking about musicians and bands.
Right. Well, we probably, and we've talked about it, Anne, but maybe we need to have like a Wonder Woman pop culture where we can talk about these things. Because I know Jasmine would get on and talk for hours about Beyonce.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of folks that would get on and talk about her. Well,
okay, I'm gonna put it out there. Beyonce, we want you on. We will have a Beyonce Fierceness podcast with some of your biggest fans. So come on, Beyonce, we want you on. We will rearrange.
It's our Wonder Woman. We'll rearrange anything and everything.
Yeah, I'll take a PTO day.
We'll fly out to where she is. We'll do whatever.